Poonam. I'm so excited for you to be here with me today on this podcast. We're going to talk about breaking generational traumas, patterns that we've inherited from our family, our mothers, our ancestors, and how we have navigated that today. And I love it because we're both South Asian women. You're my sister, which I'm really excited about. So I'm just happy to have you and have this conversation.
Thanks, sis, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So let me do this. I'm going to give folks some background on you. You are a Poonam Kumar, Principal Advisor of Communications and Branding for the Americas at Rio Tinto here in Salt Lake City, where you lead national and local partnerships. You've had over a decade of experience. You have shaped communication strategies in both the private sector and the public sector. And you've had so many different roles, but three of them have been at the Salt Lake City mayoral administration. And you are also, and you used to be a host for Salt Lake City's TV's Capital City News. You were the host. You're on camera personality.
Yes.
But what's interesting about our story is that you and I have two different moms, and so why don't you start us there? Give us some background on your why we have two different moms.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, again, I'm excited to be here today. This is my first podcast, so fun fact. Love listening to them, but have never been on one, and why not be on one with my sister? So here I am. So yeah, no, this is really, really, it's interesting because I think when a lot of people talk to us siblings, well, number one, we look and sound the same, right? But
Same.
there's a little bit of a difference there in that although we share the same biological mom and dad, I was adopted at about a year old from my aunt. So our biological mom, her younger sister couldn't have kids. And so our family's so close-knit. Aunts and uncles are like moms and dads to us. And so it was like a community that raised us. And so my biological mom ended up giving me to her younger sister who couldn't have kids. And so legally, I was adopted by the age of 1. I still grew up with, you, Neelam, and the rest of the siblings, but there was a time apart for us where we were born and raised, grew up in California. You all moved to Utah, and I stayed back in California for several more years. And eventually, my mom, who is my aunt mom, myself, and then my younger sister, which she eventually had a little girl later on down the road, about 7 years after she had officially adopted me. The three of us ended up venturing to Utah to live with her sister, my biological mom. So technically we were raised by both our moms, both sisters, and it's a bit of a unique story, but surprisingly, it's also common in many parts of the world, especially the Pacific Islands and Asia and other places. And so here we are, a very blended family.
When I tell people that story, they're always like, "Your mom gave her daughter away to her sister," and I'm like, yeah, it sounds odd, but like you said, in South Asian cultures and even our families from India and Fiji Islands, and that mix, that blend is very familiar. Like, we are a close-knit, tight family. So that is a very common exchange.
Yep.
That people are just like, what? How did that happen? But I think it has some implications, and we'll talk a little bit about that too.
Absolutely. And we always like to joke with our biological mom. And I'll just set the record straight on this call or the podcast is that, so I call my biological mom Maji, which is mom in Hindi, and then my aunt who adopted me, I call her mom. And then, so obviously, like, my uncle would be my dad, and then my biological dad, I call him Babuji, which is dad. So that's kind of how we distinguished within the family, like who's who, because it's tricky when you're like mom,
It's tricky when you have 4 parents.
Yeah. So lucky me, I get double the fun, double the, like double Mother's Day, double Father's Day, and all the good stuff. So
yeah. Well, speaking of what you get double of, what are some things growing up in our household that seem normal, traditions, culture, day-to-day traits that seem normal then, but now in your grown-up adult years, it's actually not. It's not okay. What are some of those things that you reflect back on?
Yeah, and this is a good question. I think there's a lot of things, especially growing up as a South Asian, child. But when you're a girl, especially, there are things that you think that are your everyday, average, normal. You wouldn't think twice because you were born into it. And so one of those things was anytime we'd have guests or relatives come over, what would happen in that situation is oftentimes the girls are the ones that have to sort of just check in, make sure everybody gets a hug, say hello, welcome, greet them, and then go check in with moms and aunts in the kitchen. Does anyone need tea or coffee or juice, water, snacks? And then we're the ones kind of bringing things in and out. Now, interestingly enough, we know we've got brothers, cousins, things like that.
What are they doing?
Yeah, that's the question. What are they doing?
Nothing.
And yeah, but growing up, like I never questioned those things, and so it was like you just did what you did, but it was always a very female-centric role that you had to play, and it was just implied, right? Like you never asked; it was just part of who we were. I think another piece of that too, and I'd mentioned, hugging like elders and. It was just always something like you didn't have a choice. And that's something that I see now. And I really respect parents that are raising their kids to give them a choice on who they get to hug versus not. For me, it wasn't an option. For you, it wasn't an option. Mm-hmm. We grew up having to say hello to uncles or aunts. And sometimes we didn't feel comfortable hugging the neighbor across the street that's coming to visit and dropped off something. It's awkward, but you did it because your parents it was like the right thing to do. But now when you look at today's society, it's really not. And kids have like more like intuition with that than anyone. And so anyway, so things like that I just thought was normal growing up. And now I'm finding that that's not.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about what you're saying too is that we didn't, so, today we can talk about boundaries, but growing up, boundaries never existed. And it wasn't just our immediate family members that would come into our house where we would have to show some level of respect, but it was neighbors, it was friends, it was anybody that walked into our home, it was their home. Yeah. Like you give up everything to give, provide, and make sure they feel comfortable.
Yep.
And that taught us this sort of sense of your needs don't matter, especially in the presence of other people. You got to get those up to make other people feel comfortable, and that's stuck with us because that is how we operate even now.
Yeah.
So even in the conversation of boundaries, you and I have talked about it so many times. In theory, boundaries sound great, but we have no idea how to embody that because we were never taught that to be proper. If we have boundaries, we're disrespectful. If we have boundaries, then we're not following tradition. We're not following our culture. We're looked at as problem kids. And that boundary, like you were saying, is very different for women and for young girls in our family growing up than it was for the boys and the men in our family. I think that's really
and
interesting.
I will say with boundaries, just generally speaking, like there was no boundary for us at all, right? And I think the siblings that were brothers or cousins and stuff, they could have boundaries. They could say no, or they could come back to something later. We didn't have that choice, and so that's a shocker to me. Like literally, I've learned about boundaries starting in the last couple years, and I didn't even know I could do that. Like I just didn't know that I could have boundaries, and so that has definitely been something I'm still continuing to learn is understanding that. And I remember like the family always said, anyone that comes to your doorstep, you treat them like it could be like God or something, right? Mm-hmm. And our family's Hindu, and so we believe in many gods, but they say anyone that shows up could be a reincarnation of somebody, and you show them the highest level of respect. Everybody gets that. And in theory, I think that's a beautiful thing, but at the same time, that also means that we are looking at respect in such a way that we're not putting our own self-respect first, and so that becomes problematic.
Yeah, we completely abandon our own self to please other people.
People pleasing, yeah, that's one.
You and I struggle with I would say all of our siblings. We struggle with people pleasing and wanting to be liked, and I feel like that kind of stems from that idea that give up everything and get accepted. And I think that comes back to I sit in intergenerational trauma, but I think this goes back to our country being colonized. It goes back to like just our ancestors and what they had to sort of assimilate to, and so that kind of gets passed down to us, where we have to be overgiving to be accepted, or to be at least recognized, or to be considered. I think that like has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. Everyone's happiness is more important than our own happiness. So we would never think twice about our happiness. You think about if is checking in on everybody else. Are they okay first? If they're good, then we're good. And then that people pleasing comes in, because God forbid we try to feel like, we've done anything for ourselves, or we put our own time first before anyone else. Now, again, like I said, in the last couple of years, I've been able to kind of address that and start to put self first. And you read off my bio, and I work for a very corporate company. And in the corporate culture, this is a very opposing lifestyle, right? Like you have to put yourself first in order to succeed within a business. It's just different dynamics. And so you pick up things at work that don't necessarily translate into a family setting. Like I can't call my family and tell them, hey, I'm going to pencil you in for this day, although I like to.
You've done that before.
Yeah, and it's offensive. It's beyond offensive. But I am now, because that's a form of me building a boundary so that I can create some time for myself, and just be a little bit more like thoughtful about who I'm spending time with and why. So thank you, corporate culture, for that. I'll take it.
Well, isn't that interesting too, though? Because you said it was beautiful in the way that you treat other people that come into your home like they're gods, and there's some destructive things about it, but it's beautiful in that it teaches us a little bit of selflessness, where sort of westernized culture is a little bit more like self-centered, but then at the same time, where is the balance? And we never really understood that. And so how does it feel when you do create boundaries? Like, what goes through your mind when you're like, I'm going to pencil you in, or no, I don't want to spend time with you, or I don't need to call you by this respectful name or your title, or whatever the respectability politics requires of you to create a boundary? How does it feel when you do that?
That's a really good question. And I will say I'm working through that. Like, even just the general, like, who we call, like, in our family, we say Didi means, big sister, Bea means big brother. But it's interesting, because our older siblings will call them that, but then it sort of stops at a certain point. And yet those siblings are still older than us. Like, you're my older sister, but I don't call you Didi.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is, and where that maybe picked up from. But even to this day, like, I still can't, like, it's going to take me time I'm just so ingrained in the fact that we say Didi or Bea to some of our older siblings, but sometimes they don't deserve that respect, right? And so it's like, you live your whole life respecting people, and you look up to them, and you realize that respect is a two-way streak. It's had to, like, I really never understood that it was a two-way thing. Just because you're younger doesn't mean you can't get that respect. But now back to the question of just like how, like, I guess how did I feel when I set a boundary?
How do you feel when you set boundaries?
Number one was guilt. Let's be honest. Like, I'm not used to setting boundaries. And so for me, I didn't think I could do those things. So when I did do it, I felt a mass amount of guilt. And, we laugh about this, but we talk about how we're so guilt-based. Like, sometimes when we feel guilty, we're quickly like, oh, no, I'm so sorry. That's not what I mean. Like, you don't want to make anyone feel bad. But I'm starting to step more into it. And again, I go back to that sort of corporate culture, because, you've got to be pretty cutthroat in a sense. You need to know what you want. You need to move forward with that and X, Y, and Z. And so bringing some of that into my family life helps me to create a boundary. Yeah. And obviously there's a balance, right? You can't go full like that. I think even within corporate culture, there's so much there that's debilitating for so many people. And so it's finding a balance, but having people to, like, if you have to reshift your life, and, now I'm like, I'm going into my 40s next year. And so, like, this is a whole new decade for me to own, like, my boundaries. And so now it's like you step into it, and it's like, yeah, sorry, Mom, I love you, but we have to schedule a time, because for one, there's just too many things going on in the day. So, like, I don't want to miss this very important window of time with you. And also, it's how you frame it. Mom, if you're listening, yeah. No, but I'm just saying, you want to spend that quality time with family, but we need to pencil in that time to make sure that we're doing it. Obviously, I'll move everything around, family first, but there has to be some downtime to regroup, recollect, and focus on other things that need to be done in your life too. So now I can say it feels good, and I know I'm on the right path. Before I felt guilty and wasn't sure that I was doing the right thing by having a boundary.
Yeah. Yeah. And something that's really interesting in our family, specifically our like immediate family, us siblings, out of the whole, we have a huge family, huge extended family. We have cousins after cousins after cousins who are considered our brothers, who are like, we've got a whole mix of people. We have marriages within our, like our mom married 2 other times before us. They have kids. Like it's big. We have a big family. Yet we somehow, maybe you could talk to me about this too. But we had somehow, it's our little family of siblings that carry the burden in the family, the whole family. Someone gets sick, it's us. Someone needs to do something, it's us. If just literally anything that happens in our family, we get called on. If there's a celebration, it's us that has to plan it. Like it ends up being us. And I think there's the part where it's expected of us, and there's a part where we basically set that tone. What, like, how do you experience that?
Yeah, no, and I want to give the context to the audience too about our sort of family dynamics. Like Neil mentioned, we have like a massive family, and so we're going to talk specifically about like our grandfather's side. So our grandfather had 5 kids, 2 of which me and Neelam could call, I guess, mom, basically, right? The 2 younger sisters. Yeah. And then the other 3 siblings, each of them obviously had kids. I would say most of our relatives are probably, would you say? I think we've got maybe more females in the family. Yeah. But how this goes is that, our eldest, relative, they we have a cousin, both boy and girl. And then we've got the next family, which is dominantly men. Mm-hmm. And then the next family is a blended family as well, too, but they're mixed. And so they're not, you've got half white, half Indian relatives. And this is interesting because I want to bring up this dynamic of why there's pressure on us versus some of the other relatives in our family, because what does it mean to be fully Indian, and who gets the pressure of being Indian versus not? Yeah. And so then comes our family, right? Yeah. Our siblings, and there's 4 of us. So dominantly there's three girls and 1 boy. And then my aunt mom, who adopted me, she had a younger daughter too. So then that's mostly women too in that family. But anyway, so the story goes is that I think for our family, our biological mom and dad and kids, there's been a lot of pressure for us because I think we've been the what you call, you've heard model minority, but we're like the model minority for our family, right? Yeah. So they want us to be sort of that impression of like, what's a good Indian kid? We grew up watching Bollywood movies. Like our life was supposed to be shaped that way. Like even who we were supposed to marry was supposed to look like that. We were supposed to be within a certain class, a caste, whatever. And although that was there, that was very much shaped by media. And I'd like to say history, but more media, which is false. Like, we know this. And so I think because of that, like, we have had to be the ones to model everything, whereas the other relatives didn't have to do that. And I think, I don't know that I fully know the answer, because there's some cousins I'm thinking about, I'm like, why did they not get that pressure? Now, I think they live with a lot of different traumas. Based on this expectation of them, I think that we just fully accepted it and we ran with it because of the people pleasing. We wanted to do everything our parents said. We wanted to follow that. We wanted to make sure they were happy because their happiness was number 1 before ours. So yeah, why wouldn't we plan the family thing? Why wouldn't we jump in and do this? That's how we show our love. And that's how we get recognized, especially if you're a South Asian woman.
Yeah. Ooh, and that recognition, because otherwise you don't.
No, you're voiceless.
You and I have talked about it. Growing up in our family, no one knew how to regulate their emotions. Grown-ups, young people, no one knew how to regulate their emotions. So your emotions was a sign of weakness, and it was a sign of problem. So you keep your emotions in check, and if your emotions come out, you'll get in trouble. And this was modeled to us even in the marriages that we've seen, right? The men in our family were abusive to the moms, all of them. Mm-hmm. All of the women in our family have had abusive relationships. We've seen it modeled where emotions are bad. and you get punished for it. So that leaves us without a voice, right? And so what you're saying is that this is the way.
Yeah.
You perfection and people pleasing and going above and beyond, overachieving is the way to have a voice and be recognized. Otherwise, you fall. You fall and you'll be.
And I will say,
behind.
like, with our families too, and again, this is shaped by very like cultural. I think this is even pre-colonization. We can't even blame colonization for this, but the male patriarchy is real. Like, it's real. It still lives. It exists today. We try to tackle it, but yet it's still very much there. Again, being raised in a culture where Bollywood was kind of our go-to and our source for media, and the family is just glued to the TV watching like soap operas all day, every day.
It's loud.
So loud. Like, you, God forbid,
Like
you have like a comment you want to make or say, hey, I got into a car accident. Like, nobody cares. It's like
That TV is loud
not while the
as
program
hell.
is on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, anyways, but just the way men are treated on shows like that was modeled in our own household. Like, the men, the you call it, what do you call it? Indian man-child?
Desi man child.
Oh, Desi man. So the thing about that, and I don't know if you've explained to your, listeners about that, but it's just, this coddling of the Indian male, the man, and all the things that the women have to do, be submissive and all that to cater to them. And the funny thing is that the women we're talking about, these are the moms and the aunts and everything, they did have bad relationships with their husband. So they were actually quite independent because they had to be, but they would still give credit to the men in places that I personally don't think that they should have. But culturally, they had to. Or they stayed in really bad relationships because of fear of just what society thought. Again, that goes back to their people-pleasing and everything, too. But then coming back to us, it's like we grew up with that, and so our whole lives, like, it's based on, yeah, you have a voice, you can say whatever you want, you can do whatever you want, you can be seen if you want, but at the end of the day, like, your choices were very much dictated by the uncles or the man in the house, or make sure you have a good husband, make sure you have a successful life, but that means you have to get married to do that. You can't just be single and, live that life.
No.
And so that's just something that I think our generation now has to tackle. Like, you've got a son, Nee. Like,
Yeah.
So how will we raise these, kids in our lives to not carry that forward and have more respect for women?
Yeah. What are some other patterns, toxic patterns that have been passed down to us, to you specifically, that you try to tackle, or at least aware of?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I talked a little bit about work and stuff too, but I've seen some of these things come back up in places like work. Like, I think self-worthiness and perfectionism, like you said, people-pleasing, these are all trauma responses to how we grew up. I didn't know that. I mean, now to this day, I'm very happy to say that, I have a coach that I go to, and, therapy is something that I'm trying to include more in my life, and I'm encouraging more of that for family and friends as well too, because you don't realize that there's patterns that exist. And so I don't realize, like, for me, I recently just got a promotion at work too, and it's exciting, but it's one where, like, I've had conversations with you too about, like, I think sometimes our male counterparts, especially, it's easy for them to just go and ask for a raise, and they're entitled, or they feel
white
like
male counterparts
that
too.
That
Yeah.
exactly, absolutely. And it's easy to just go up and just say, I'm qualified, I deserve this. Even with applying for like certain jobs and stuff like that, I'm still in the same boat where I don't feel like I have that confidence where I can do that. I always feel like I'm not qualified enough, or I've got to wait till I get X, Y, and Z before I should apply. I have overlooked many opportunities for promotions because I didn't feel like I was ready.
Yeah.
And I think that is a trauma response that comes deeply from the family side. And I didn't actually put two and two together. I literally just thought something was wrong with me. I was just like, oh, maybe I'm just not good enough, And so all this stuff starts to sit with you your whole life, and you just think, I'm not moving up the ladder. I don't see myself this way because I don't believe that I can be. Yeah. And then you're realizing when you're talking to some of these colleagues or counterparts, it's right there. They just go and grab it. And it's always been there for me. I just have never done it because I'm too fearful of it. There's something blocking me. And so that is, I think, something that kind of stems from the growing up and people pleasing and not feeling confident in my own decisions or having the control to do so.
Yeah. Yeah. I think back to our Nani, our grandmother. She was a pretty remarkable person, and she got married to our grandfather, and he was great. He was also a remarkable person, but she had to dim herself quite a bit to be in our family. And there is some amazing parts of her, magical things about her that we know of. That she was a healer. She really tuned into spirituality, but she had to turn that off about her because, one, it wasn't socially accepted, but then two, her duty, her job was to be there to be at home and to cook and to clean and to do all those things. And she taught then her daughters to just cook and clean and do all those things. Anything outside of that would just be a problem, just like it would be for her. And so then as we're thinking about it, and as you're in your corporate job, it's you kind of stay happy with what you have. And if you go outside of that, then it's a problem. And so that like reach.
Or that you're not deserving or something.
That you're not deserving of it, that you're not good enough for it. That all of that has been like really passed down and harnessed in our bodies from several generations ago. And so then how do you then undo that? What does that look like for you?
Well, and I'm just going to go back to, I think we've got Mental Health Awareness Month coming up and suicide prevention. There's all these things that are coming up, and I'm glad that that communities are becoming very vocal and there's more resources. And I hope that there'll be more, because I just think that I'm just a big fan of like the fact that if you can get those resources and that support, that it's there to help unravel all those things. Because I think literally as a human in this life, when you get here, you're just trying to figure it out, and you will continue to figure it out. And you might figure out pieces and bits and all of that, but there's still more to that story too. Yeah. And so I think and I'm on this journey right now. I mean, I don't have the answers, but for me, I think being able to have time that I'm carving out to be able to talk to professionals that can help me understand that there are patterns and that there could be some trauma within my system that is causing me to create blocks like this. Because, I think it's kind of a push and a pull. And sometimes I fall into that cooking and cleaning. Well, not cooking. I should definitely not say that because I'm a horrible cook. But the cleaning aspect of things is sometimes my go-to when I'm stressed. So and that could be another topic, the OCD. So,
well, no, that's interesting because we kind of talked a little bit about it yesterday. But when we just had mentioned that growing up in our household, we didn't feel like we had a voice, that our emotions were supposed to be suppressed or not shown. You had mentioned yesterday in our conversation that your OCD and wanting perfection, it kicks up quite a bit, and it's pretty like intense for you, especially around family.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I didn't actually know it was a thing. It was my cousin that brought it up. Like, we often have family get-togethers or birthdays, and so sometimes we'll rent out an Airbnb and, spend time with the family and all that. And but for some reason, I take on a certain persona or role anytime that happens. So I'm usually the one, and this kind of goes back and forth maybe between you and me and, again, our siblings within our family, that we coordinate, we book this and that. But getting the groceries, making sure the kitchen's good, and then I constantly clean. Like, I think I've gotten better, but it's like when I'm with the family, something kicks up, and I didn't know it was an issue, but I just continue to just keep cleaning. Things don't seem perfect enough.
Yeah, like
so I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Wiping the counters, cleaning the dishes,
checking in on so-and-so. Do they need water? Do they need this? Are you good? It's like I'm a robot. I'm a literal robot, and it took my cousin to say, I know this is weird. Like, I'm seeing you in this. Like, you've done the same thing like 3 times. Are you noticing that you're like picking up things, putting it back down, wiping it? And I'm like, no, I don't think I'm doing that, but I'm literally a robot.
And you're like, are you noticing that you're just sitting on the couch?
That's true. And he's literally a robot. So it's like, yeah, how about you now? So I feel like there's things that's where me like going to a therapist and getting that extra like, hey, did you know, like, or this pattern is actually something that you're turning to find your way of control in the way in which you can within your family. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's just deeper things that I'm still exploring with that. But yeah, I've totally noticed that. In the workplace, it looks different though. So in the workplace, it for me, like that corporate culture works well because I think my family shaped me to do well in that space. Sometimes you're a robot in the corporate field too. So that's probably why that it makes sense for me. So, you're in that space and you do what you can, and it's fine. I mean, I think one thing I will say, and I don't want to make it sound like we didn't have a voice in the family. I do feel like our moms and our aunts lean on us quite a bit. They can trust us. For us as I think adults now too, but now it's like we have to take care, and we do need to make those decisions. If we're going on a family trip or someone needs medical attention or care or love or support like that, like they come to us now. Yeah. So now the tables have turned, and we've seen this in Indian culture many, many times too, and many other cultures, is that once our elders get older, they come to their kids and their kids take care of them. One thing we didn't realize was that we would be doing that for our parents, but also for some of our aunts as well,
for
too.
all of their siblings.
And so this has been a real shocker, I think, for us, is that we did not know that.
Yeah.
And what do? We're not going to turn anyone away. We have to be there to take care of our family, because we see our family as more than just mom and dad. And especially with my extra layer, it gets a little politically tough in the family. It's like, okay, got 2 moms, 2 dads. What about the other aunts? They're in the same boat. They kind of raised us too.
Yep.
So anyways, I feel like I'm going all over the place here.
No, that's true. And you're reminding me that we have these women in our family. So if we just think about our mom's sisters, the women, there's 4 of them. And then our grandmother, our aunt grandmother, I guess is what you would call it. These are pillars in our family, and they do rely on us now. They do rely on us, and they also feel very comfortable and also very safe knowing that we've got them. And part of us feels like we do need to get them because they've gotten us. They've helped raise us in some sense too. But they've helped raise all of us. And why is only some of us feeling? So it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting pattern that we have yet to break. I'm glad that we're aware of it and we're talking about it at least.
I think that's the first step, is awareness in this. And even with the cousins and stuff too, they were raised by my mom, Maji, all of the other moms too, but they don't have that same level of respect back to them either. Somehow it's stuck with us. And I still think a lot of it has to do with being Indian enough. And I'm going to go back to that whole story of our grandparents migrated here from the Fiji Islands, ancestry from India, colonization was involved. There's a whole backstory on that. But we're first generation American. And with that comes the balance, or that duality of trying to be American, right? This is our culture. I was born and raised here. I consider myself American first.
Yeah.
But then the other piece of it is being Indian enough. And I think there was a fear in our household that we weren't Indian enough. So you're watching the Bollywood shows, you're watching the movies and all these things. And it's like, we have to model that. Yeah. We have to model what they do, or else we're not Indian enough. But when did media dictate how Indian I was? So that's something I'm also confronting in my life right now, is you're seeing all kinds of things going on around the world where media is shaping the story, and it's not the case.
Yep.
So I think that's something that we also need to just be more vocal about in our family too, is that we can't consume all that stuff and believe it for what it is. We define who we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how Indian we are. So
I love that. What is Indian anyway?
I have no idea. But I will say, I think one answer to that is how we care and show love for our family. That to me is Indian.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what our ancestors, how they showed up for each other in their village, that's the Indian, that's the culture part that we want to try to preserve. Yeah. With boundaries.
Yeah. It looks different with boundaries. I like that.
So my last question, we have this, you had mentioned, I have a son. You have a little baby on the way.
I have a bun in the oven. Yes, I do.
Second trimester.
Yes.
And it's such an exciting time for our family. Because we're talking about generations and patterns have been passed down to us, and we inherently will be passing things down to our kids. I already know I've already passed down whatever I did to my 4-year-old. What are some things as a new parent what are the things that you're thinking about in terms of breaking some of those patterns and how you want to raise this child?
Yeah. And we talked about this a little bit too, but, you know, I think that it's a tough question because I'm just stepping into motherhood and literally in a place where I don't know what I'm doing at all. Like, great that I figured out the corporate thing. It's like probably where I feel the safest at this point. This is like I really don't know how to raise a kid. So I'm super nervous about this. And I think it's one question that I'll have to take back and also continue to think about. But I think these topics that we've been talking about today, continuing to be vocal about it with you and the rest of our siblings, but also kind of bringing in our aunts and moms into these conversations and also challenge them. Working through that piece is going to be really important as this next generation and, this little bun in my oven comes out. Like, it's going to be another storyline moving forward. So I just want to be upfront about the things that they're seeing and they're doing. And even with my traumas, like, I'm not sure if this is the right thing to do or not, but I want to just be open with the fact that these conversations we're having can be discussed and not hidden, because I think we came from a culture where if you felt a certain way or if something ever happened in your life, like as a woman especially, you couldn't share that. Just don't share it. Just let it sweep it under the rug and move forward. I don't want that to be the case with this next generation.
Yeah.
And again, I'm just mental health care and making sure that kids have the proper resources and things that they need to be able to talk about those things, because there's no denying it. I'm going to be passing on generational trauma no matter what. And so what that's going to be, I'm not sure, but I just want to make sure that my eyes and ears are open to being there to support my child.
Yeah. You're going to be an awesome mom.
Thank you.
You have a big sister
I'll
to
come
look up
back to this show in the future and let you know how that's going. So,
I'm really excited
thanks
about
for the
that.
confidence.
Well, I do believe it's a short conversation. It's a quick conversation, but I do believe that even in this moment, we were able to break some patterns together, which is really cool. And so I hope we continue that conversation. We encourage others to have conversations with their family, their siblings, around some of the patterns that they carry and wanting to break those patterns. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming here. I appreciate you sharing. I appreciate you just being my sister.
Aw, that's sweet. Thanks, sis. I love you. And just to set the record straight, this is not Neelam talking to Neelam. It's her sister. We sound the same and we look the same. So there you go.
I'm just talking to myself.
Yeah, I know. I was like, you're just recording yourself. But no, thank you, sister. I think
You're
this
so
is
cute.
helpful. And I think that you're right. For those that are listening out there, if they have siblings or cousins or even friends and relatives, that they can have these very vocal conversations about it, just ask the questions, right? Like, why have we been doing the things that we've been doing? I think the very first question is, what did you think was normal that you're finding out that is not? I think that's the takeaway for the audience, too, is to take that question with them and maybe start to unwind what that is. And you're going to find that maybe there are things that we as a culture or society or just within your family have been doing that just needs to be, like, questioned. Why?
Yeah. Being critical of some of the things, the heirlooms that have been passed to us, crowned on our head.
Yeah, it took me 40 years, so I'm just saying maybe this will help somebody a decade sooner.
True. Thank you, sis. I love you.
Yeah, love you too. Thank you.